Apple Pie Promises. An Alphabet Sweetheart's Romance. Written by Susanne Ash. Chapter 1. Tessa. The key to my aunt's cabin sticks in the lock, like it's testing my resolve. I jiggle it once, twice, and on the third try, the door finally creeps open with a whine of rusty hinges. A wave of autumn crisp mountain air rushes past me, carrying the lingering scent of cinnamon and vanilla that I'll always associate with Aunt May. Well, here goes nothing, I whisper to myself, hitching my messenger bag higher on my shoulder. I grab the welcome basket someone left by the front door and step inside. The floorboards creak beneath my feet, each sound echoing in the empty space. Dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, making the whole scene feel like a snow globe someone's just shaken up. I pause in the doorway, taking in the familiar yet different space. The kitchen still has its cheerful yellow curtains and the collection of rooster-themed canisters on the counter. But without Aunt May's humming, without the constant aroma of something delicious baking in the oven, it feels like a museum piece rather than a home. My eyes burn, and I blink rapidly. No crying, Tessa. You're here to start fresh, remember? The sound of my voice bounces off the walls, making me feel even more alone. I set my laptop bag on the kitchen table. It'll be my mobile office for the foreseeable future. I walk around and open a couple of windows. The crisp October breeze carries the scent of pine needles and wood smoke, reminding me that I'm not in Charlotte anymore. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes 3 times. That's when I spot it, propped against the cookie jar like it's been waiting for me all along, a well-worn recipe card in Aunt May's looping handwriting. Blue ribbon apple pie, the title reads, and beneath it, first place, Juniper Falls Harvest Festival, 2003. My heart does a little flip as I pick up the card, running my fingers over the spatters and stains that mark it as well loved. Aunt May used to say that a pristine recipe card meant an unloved recipe. This one was clearly adored. This is it, I say, gripping the card tighter. This is how I'll do it. I'll enter the festival, just like you did. With renewed purpose, I unload the rest of my car and get settled in the small rustic cabin that is now mine. After getting settled in, I dig through the kitchen cabinets until I find the basic ingredients. There's flour, sugar, and salt. The apples in the welcome basket Mrs. Elliot left on the porch will be perfect. I can do this. How hard can pie making be? 2 hours later, with flour in my hair, butter under my fingernails, and something that looks more like a crusty frisbee than a pie sitting sadly on the counter, I have my answer. The smoke detector's shrill beeping has finally stopped, but my confidence is as deflated as my attempted crust. I slump onto one of the kitchen chairs, staring at the recipe card. I'm sorry, Aunt May, I whisper, brushing a smudge of flour from the corner of the paper. I don't know what I was thinking. I can barely make toast without burning it. How am I supposed to live up to your legacy? Through the open window, I hear laughter floating up from the town below. Juniper Falls, North Carolina, is getting ready for the Harvest Festival. I can see the orange and yellow banners being strung across Main Street from here. Everyone in town has a story about Aunt May's pies, about her generosity, about how she made this place feel like home to everyone who crossed her threshold. And here I am, her only niece, unable to even manage a basic crust. I wonder if she regrets leaving me this place in her will. I push back from the table, embarrassed by the tears threatening to spill. This isn't just about pie. It's about belonging. About finding my place in this close-knit mountain community that already has such a clear picture of who they think I should be. The recipe card sits innocently on the table, mocking my failure. But as I start to crumple it up, I stop myself. Aunt May never gave up on anything, or anyone. She wouldn't want me to quit before I'd really tried. Okay, I say, straightening my shoulders. Round 2. But first, I need more supplies. Real supplies. I grab my purse and the recipe card, carefully tucking it into my pocket. And maybe some advice. I head for the door, trying to ignore the disaster zone that is now my kitchen. Somewhere in this town, There has to be someone who can help me figure this out. Aunt May always said Juniper Falls was full of angels in disguise. I just have to find one willing to teach a hopeless baker how to make a pie worthy of her memory. The bell above Brooks' General Store chimes as I push open the heavy wooden door, and I'm immediately enveloped by the scent of coffee, fresh herbs, and something sweetly familiar I can't quite place. The worn hardwood floor gleams in the autumn sunlight streaming through tall windows. They are real wood beams, not the manufactured kind, and look like they've been here for close to a century. Oh wow, I breathe, taking in the carefully arranged displays of local produce, the ceiling-high shelves lined with colorful jars, and the antique cash register that looks like it belongs in a museum. It's exactly the kind of place Aunt May would have loved, a perfect blend of practical and whimsical. Chances are good she shopped here often. I pull out her recipe card, smoothing its worn edges. Okay, let's see what we need. My finger traces down the list of ingredients, and I start gathering them in my arms. I need more flour, butter, and salt. When I reach for a bag of generic apples, a deep voice behind me nearly makes me jump out of my skin. Not those. I whirl around, nearly dropping everything I'm holding. The man standing there is tall, really tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of rugged features that belong on the cover of a wilderness magazine. Dark hair falls across his forehead, and his blue eyes are so intense I almost take a step back. He's wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. I'm sorry? I manage, trying to get my heart rate under control. Both from the surprise and, well, everything else about him. He gestures to the apples I was about to grab. Those are eating apples. No good for baking. His voice is gruff, but there's something almost musical in its deepness, like distant thunder. Oh. I look down at the apples, then back at him. And you're sure about that because? One dark eyebrow lifts slightly. Because I own this store and I know what my products are good for. He reaches past me to grab a different variety of apples. The man smells like coffee and pine and something spicy. These are Northern Spy. Better structure, won't turn to mush in the oven. Northern Spy? I can't help but smile. That sounds like a Cold War code name. His expression doesn't change, but I swear I see something flicker in those blue eyes. They're heritage apples. Local. The orchards up here have been growing them for generations. Right. Of course. I shift my armload of supplies awkwardly. I don't suppose you also know the secret to making a pie crust that doesn't look like it's been run over by a truck? Now both eyebrows go up. You're making pie? There's something in his tone that makes me straighten my spine. Yes, I am. Is there a law against that in Juniper Falls? No law. He glances at my flour-dusted shirt and the sugar sprinkled in my hair, evidence of my earlier disaster. Just seems like maybe you should start with something simpler. A cobbler or crisp, maybe. Or toast. Heat rushes to my cheeks. I can make toast. Usually. Sometimes. And anyway, it has to be pie. Specifically, apple pie. For the Harvest Festival. Something changes in his expression at that. There's a slight tightening around his eyes, a subtle shift in his stance. The Harvest Festival Pie Contest? That's the one. I lift my chin, daring him to make another comment about my baking abilities. In honor of my aunt. He runs a hand through his hair, making it even more attractively disheveled. You're May Arden's niece. It's not a question, but I answer anyway. Tessa. I just moved into her cabin. I pause, studying his face. And you are? Hale Fletcher. He holds out his hand and firmly shakes mine. You knew my aunt? I ask, ignoring the warmth of his skin that lingers. Everyone knew May. There's a softness in his voice when he says her name that makes my throat tight. Her pies were legendary. I know. I swallow hard. That's why I have to do this. I found her recipe and I thought. I trail off, not sure how to explain it to this stranger who probably thinks I'm crazy. I just need to try. He's quiet for a long moment, those blue eyes studying me with an intensity that makes my skin tingle. Finally, he lets out a long breath. Your butter's too warm. I blink at the sudden change of subject. What? He nods at the butter in my arms. Educated guess. For pie crust, you need it cold. Ice cold. He turns and walks toward the back of the store, leaving me standing there with my arms full of ingredients, wondering if I'm supposed to follow. After a moment's hesitation, I do. He leads me to a massive old refrigerator that hums quietly in the corner. The secret's in the temperature, he says, pulling out a different package of butter. Everything needs to be cold. The butter, the water, even the flour if you can manage it. And your hands. He glances at my flour-covered fingers. Hot hands make tough crust. Are you speaking from experience? I can't help asking, fascinated by this gruff man who apparently knows the secrets of perfect pie crust. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. My mother taught me. There's something in those 4 words that makes me wonder if she's the reason he seems so gruff. But before I can ask, the bell above the door chimes again. You'll want a pastry cutter too, he says, already turning away. 3rd aisle, halfway down, top shelf. He strides toward the front of the store, calling out a greeting to whoever just walked in. May didn't use one, but it'll help, trust me. I stand there for a moment, clutching my cold butter and feeling strangely bereft. It's ridiculous. He's a stranger who barely cracked a smile during our entire interaction. But there was something there, in those brief moments when he was teaching me about pie crust. Something that felt almost like a connection. I find the pastry cutter right where he said it would be, along with a ceramic pie plate that's so pretty it makes my heart skip. The price tag makes it skip again, for different reasons, but I add it to my pile anyway. If I'm going to fail at this pie-making endeavor, I might as well fail in style. When I make my way to the counter, he's there again, sorting through what looks like invoices. The afternoon sun slanting through the windows catches the silver threads in his dark hair, just a few, barely noticeable unless you're looking. Which I'm not. Obviously. He rings up my items efficiently, those capable hands moving with surprising grace. When he gets to the pie plate, he pauses. This is a May original. What? I lean closer, examining the ceramic plate. It's cream-colored, with delicate blue flowers hand-painted around the rim. Your aunt made it. She used to do ceramics in the winter when the tourists left and things got quiet. His thumb traces one of the flowers, almost reverently. She always said pie tasted better in a plate made with love. The tightness in my throat is back. I had no idea she made these. He carefully wraps the plate in brown paper. There's a lot of your aunt in this town, if you know where to look. Our fingers brush when he hands me the package, and I swear I feel a spark. It's like static electricity, but warmer. His eyes meet mine for a heartbeat, and I see something flicker in their blue depths, before he looks away. Thank you, I say softly, gathering my bags. For the help with the ingredients, and for telling me about the plate. He just nods, already turning back to his invoices. But as I reach the door, I hear his voice again. Miss Arden? I turn, hand on the doorknob. Yes? Keep your water ice cold too. And don't overwork the dough. A smile tugs at my lips. Any other secrets you want to share? For a moment, the stern line of his mouth softens. Come back if you need more butter. Cold butter. The bell chimes as I step out into the afternoon sunshine, my arms full of bags and my head full of blue eyes and gruff voices and the mysteries of pie crust. I'm halfway down the street before I realize I never got his name. But something tells me I'll be back for more butter soon.
Chapter 2. Hale. The morning sun hasn't cleared the mountains yet, but I'm already pulling day-old pastries from the display case. Old habits die hard. The routine is automatic after so many years. Sort, wrap, price, stack. Some will go to the church food bank, others marked down for the early birds who come in for coffee. As I work, my mind keeps wandering to yesterday's customer. To flower-dusted hair and determined hazel eyes. To the way May Arden's niece looked at my store like it was something magical instead of just an old family obligation. I shake my head, trying to clear it. I don't need this distraction. Don't need to remember how her fingers brushed mine when I handed her that pie plate, or how the scent of vanilla lingered after she left. Probably from whatever baking disaster she'd attempted before coming here. The bell chimes and I don't need to look up to know who it is. Only one person comes in this early on delivery days. Good morning, Hale Fletcher. Hazel Elliott's voice carries the same cheerful lilt it had when she was my third-grade teacher. You're looking particularly broody today. I grunt in response, keeping my eyes on the pastries. But Hazel's never been one to take a hint. I brought you something. She sets a covered dish on the counter. The familiar jingle of her charm bracelet accompanies every movement. A little breakfast. Can't have our favorite shopkeeper wasting away. I eat fine, I mutter, but I lift the cover anyway. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls makes my stomach growl traitorously. She pulls a tin from the pocket of her sweater, the one she's worn every Tuesday for at least a decade, and pops a mint into her mouth. I suppose that's why you're getting so thin. All that fine eating. I shoot her a look. Did you need something, Hazel? Besides criticizing my dietary habits? Can't a woman check on her favorite former student? She perches on one of the old stools by the counter, smoothing her flowered skirt. Though now that you mention it, I did see poor Tessa Arden this morning. That sweet girl was trying to dispose of what I believe was meant to be a pie without anyone noticing. Something tightens in my chest. That's not my concern. No? Hazel's green eyes twinkle. Strange, because I could have sworn I saw her leaving your store yesterday with quite a collection of baking supplies. And everyone knows you make the best pie crust in town. Present company excluded, of course. Pie. You? I focus on wrapping another pastry, ignoring the way my neck heats up under her knowing gaze. I sold her some butter. That's all. Cold butter, I hope. That's essential for a good crust. She pauses, and I can feel the trap closing. Though I suppose you already told her that, didn't you? I did. I told her too much, if I'm being honest. Let myself get pulled into those eager questions, that sunshine smile. She needed the right ingredients. It's my job to help customers find what they need. Hazel unwraps another mint, the paper crinkling in the quiet store. You know, May would have loved this. My hand still. What? Her niece, carrying on the tradition. Though the poor dear clearly needs help. She sighs dramatically. If only there was someone in town who knew about pie making. Someone who learned from his mother, perhaps. Someone who might understand what it means to want to honor a family legacy. Hazel. There's a warning in my voice that she ignores completely. I'm just saying, that cabin gets awfully quiet. And May was such a good friend to this town. To your mother, especially during her illness. She stands, brushing invisible crumbs from her skirt. But you're right. It's not your concern. She heads for the door, then pauses. Though if you happen to find yourself up that way, you might want to check on her smoke detector. I heard it going off again this morning. The bell chimes as she leaves, letting in a gust of cool mountain air. I stand there for a long moment, staring at the wrapped pastries without really seeing them. Through the windows, I can just make out the roof of May's cabin nestled against the pines. Smoke detector. Right. Before I can talk myself out of it, I flip the back in 15-minute sign on the door and grab my keys. This is just about being a good neighbor. About preventing a fire hazard. About repaying an old debt to May Arden. It has nothing to do with hazel eyes or sunshine smiles or the way she said thank you like she meant it. Nothing at all. The drive up to the cabin takes exactly 4 minutes. Not that I'm counting. I've made this trip hundreds of times over the years, delivering groceries to May when the weather was bad or her arthritis was acting up. The gravel crunches under my tires just the same, but everything else feels different. I'm halfway to the door when I hear it. This isn't the blare of a smoke detector, but something much worse. Crying. I find her sitting on the porch steps, head in her hands, shoulders shaking slightly. There's flour in her hair again, and something that might be butter smeared on her shirt. It's a graphic tee that features a cartoon slice of pie with the words easy as pie across the front. My chest does something uncomfortable. She must hear my approach because her head snaps up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. Oh! She swipes quickly at her cheeks. Mr. Fletcher. I wasn't. I mean, I didn't. Hale, I say, because watching her struggle for words feels wrong. My name's Hale. Hale, she repeats softly, and something about the way she says it makes my name sound different. I suppose you're here about the smoke detector? I promise I opened all the windows this time. Actually, I hear myself say, I'm here about your pie. Her laugh is watery but real. What's left of it, you mean? She gestures to what I now realize is a blackened disc cooling on the porch railing. I think this one might actually be worse than yesterday's attempt. I study the sorry-looking pie, then her tear-stained face, then the cabin where May taught me to crimp edges and lattice crust on long winter afternoons. Where my mother spent her last good days, sharing recipes and stories while I pretended not to listen. Get your butter, I say finally. The cold butter, I add, because some habits die hard. And your flour. We're starting over. Her eyes light up like I've just offered her the moon instead of a baking lesson. Really? You'll help me? I nod once, sharply, already regretting this decision. But then she smiles, really smiles, and something inside me shifts, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Thank you, she breathes, scrambling to her feet. I'll get everything. Don't go anywhere. She disappears inside, leaving a trail of flour and enthusiasm in her wake. I look up at the cabin's weathered eaves, where generations of barn swallows have built their nests. This is all your fault, I tell the ghost of May Arden. You and your niece with her cartoon pie shirts and her terrible baking skills. I swear I can hear May's laugh on the breeze, mixing with the sound of Tessa clattering around in the kitchen. What have I gotten myself into? The butter needs to be pea-sized, I say for the third time, watching Tessa attack the flour mixture with her pastry cutter like she's trying to win a fight. Not microscopic. She blows a strand of hair from her face, frowning at the bowl. How can you even tell what size they are? It all looks like sand to me. I reach across the counter and still her hands before she can pulverize the butter completely. Her skin is warm beneath my fingers, and I pull back quickly. Here! Look! I take a pinch of the mixture, showing her the tiny butter pieces. Like this. Any smaller and you'll lose the flakiness. Oh! She leans in close, studying the mixture, and the scent of vanilla washes over me again. I see it now. I think. She gives me a sheepish smile. Sorry I'm such a disaster at this. You're not. I stop, because actually, she is. She's managed to get flour on the ceiling and there's a healthy dusting of flour in her hair from her enthusiastic measuring technique. But there's something endearing about her determination. Not that I'm noticing things like that. Slow down. Making pie crust isn't a race, says the man who can probably make one in his sleep. She returns to cutting the butter, gentler this time. Where did you learn all this, anyway? The question catches me off guard. Images flash through my mind. Sunday mornings in our kitchen, Mom's hands guiding mine through the motions, the smell of cinnamon and love and home. I push them away. Around. She glances up at me, those hazel eyes too perceptive. Thankfully, she doesn't push. Well, wherever it was, thank you for sharing the knowledge. Even if I am your worst student ever. Second worst, I say before I can stop myself. Henry Caldwell once tried to convince my mother that margarine was an acceptable substitute for butter. She almost banned him from the store. Tessa's laugh fills the kitchen, bright and unexpected. The pie contest champion uses margarine? That should be grounds for disqualification. He doesn't anymore. Mom set him straight. The memory brings a reluctant smile to my face. Rather forcefully. We work in comfortable silence for a while, and slowly a passable pie crust takes shape. The filling is easier, though I have to stop her from adding too much cinnamon 3 times. But cinnamon is the best part, she protests. It's supposed to enhance the apples, not overwhelm them. I adjust the spices, pretending not to notice her sticking her tongue out at me when she thinks I'm not looking. Finally, the pie goes into the oven. Tessa immediately plasters herself in front of it, peering through the glass like she's watching a movie. It won't bake faster if you stare at it, I point out. She ignores me, still watching intently. How will I know if it's done? When the crust is golden and the filling bubbles. I start cleaning up, trying to restore some order to the chaos she's created. About 45 minutes. Perfect time for coffee? She's already reaching for the pot, giving me a hopeful look. Unless you need to get back to the store. I should say yes. Should make my escape before this starts feeling too comfortable, too familiar. Coffee's fine. Her smile is like sunrise breaking over the mountains. While the pie bakes, she tells me about her graphic design work, about moving from Charlotte, about finding her aunt's recipe card that first day. I find myself listening more than talking, watching the way her hands move when she's excited about something. I want to make her proud, you know? She wraps her hands around her coffee mug, suddenly serious. The recipe card says that pie won her an award. If I could even come close to that. I set my mug down carefully. Tessa. What? She must read something in my expression because her face falls. What's wrong? You can't use that recipe for the contest. A winning recipe can't be entered again. It's in the rules. Oh. The word is small, deflated. Oh no. I didn't realize that. She slumps in her chair. What am I going to do now? There are ways to modify recipes, I hear myself say. Change the spice blend, try different apple varieties, add nuts, adjust the technique. Make it your own. She lets out a laugh that sounds more like a sob. I can barely follow the original recipe with help. How am I supposed to develop a new one? Something twists in my chest. Something that feels dangerously like caring. I take a long drink of coffee, buying time, trying to talk myself out of what I'm about to do. I fail. I'll help you, I say finally. But we do this my way. 2 lessons a week, early mornings before the store opens. You follow my instructions exactly, no extra cinnamon. She manages a watery smile at that. And this is strictly about the pie. Nothing else. Nothing else, she agrees quickly, but there's a spark in her eyes that makes me nervous. Thank you, Hale. Really. The timer dings before I can respond. She practically bounces to the oven, and despite myself, I move to stand beside her as she opens the door. The pie isn't perfect. The crust is a little uneven, the edges slightly overdone. But it's golden brown and fragrant, and the filling is bubbling just like it should be. We did it! She beams up at me, and for a moment, I forget all my rules about keeping things strictly practical. Here! I reach for the pie, muscle memory taking over. My mom taught me a trick for checking if it's done. I tilt the pie slightly, showing her how the filling moves. See how it flows? Like slow honey? That's what you want. Your mom taught you a lot about baking, she says softly. Just like that, the walls slam back up. I set the pie down carefully. Let it cool for at least 30 minutes. Don't cut it before then or the filling will run. Hale. She takes a step toward me, but I'm already heading for the door. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Don't be late. I pause with my hand on the doorknob. And Tessa? Where's something you don't mind getting flour on? Her laugh follows me out onto the porch, wrapping around me like warm butter and cinnamon and memories I thought I'd buried years ago. This is a terrible idea. But as I walk to my truck, the morning sun warming my face, I can't quite bring myself to regret it. Yet.
Chapter 3. Tessa. The morning mist still clings to the mountains as Hale's truck winds up the narrow road to Highland Orchards. The heater fights against the October chill, and I wrap my hands around my travel mug of coffee, sneaking glances at his profile. He's focused on driving, one hand resting loosely on the wheel, the other wrapped around his own mug. Black coffee, no sugar, because of course it is. You're staring, he says without looking at me. Heat rushes to my cheeks. I'm not staring. I'm observing. For design purposes. One eyebrow lifts slightly. Design purposes? Absolutely. The way the sunrise hits your skull is very aesthetically interesting. That gets me a side eye, but I swear I see his mouth twitch. I don't scowl. You're literally scowling right now. This is my normal face. That's even worse, I say, and I'm rewarded with what might almost be a chuckle. The truck bumps over a cattle guard, and I grab the dashboard to steady myself. So, walking me through different apple varieties is part of our strictly practical lessons? Knowing your ingredients is fundamental. He turns onto a gravel drive lined with gnarled apple trees. You can't make a good pie with mediocre apples. I don't know. Add enough cinnamon. No. You're no fun. So I've been told. He parks near a weathered barn and kills the engine. Ready for Apple Varieties 101? Do I get a grade at the end? He opens his door, but not before I catch that almost smile again. Depends on how many times you mention cinnamon. The orchard is beautiful in the early morning light. Rows of trees stretch toward the mountains, their branches heavy with fruit. The air is crisp and sweet, and somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. Hale leads me down a row of trees, and I notice he walks slower than usual, matching my pace. These are Honeycrisp, he says, reaching up to pluck an apple. His flannel shirt rides up slightly, revealing a strip of skin above his jeans, and I quickly look away. Good eating apples, but too watery for pie. He hands me the apple, his calloused fingers brushing against mine. That same spark of electricity I felt in the store shoots through me, and from the way he pulls back quickly, I think he feels it too. I take a bite to cover my reaction. Oh wow, I say, surprised by the burst of flavor. That's amazing. He's watching me with an intensity that makes my skin tingle. The cold nights make them sweeter. He clears his throat and starts walking again. Come on. The pie apples are up here. We spend the next hour wandering through the orchard as Hale introduces me to varieties I've never heard of. Not only Northern Spy, but also Bramley, Rhode Island Greening, and more. His knowledge is impressive, and something about the way he talks about them makes my heart do funny things in my chest. The trick is mixing varieties, he explains, reaching up to test the firmness of a particularly large apple. You want some that'll hold their shape and some that'll cook down more. I try to focus on the apples and not on the way his shirt pulls across his shoulders as he reaches up. Like complementary colors and design, I say. Different elements working together. He looks at me then, really looks at me, and something warm unfurls in my stomach. Exactly like that. We're standing closer than we need to be, I realize suddenly. Close enough that I can see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, smell the coffee on his breath. A branch snaps somewhere nearby, and we both step back. Hale runs a hand through his hair, making it stand up in ways that should look ridiculous, but somehow don't. These, he says gruffly, moving to another tree. Baldwin apples. There. Let me guess, good for pie? Smart Alec. But there's no heat in it. He reaches for an apple, and I do too, our hands meeting around the same piece of fruit. Neither of us lets go immediately. Sorry, I murmur, but I don't move away. His thumb brushes against my wrist, so lightly I might have imagined it. We should. He clears his throat. We should check the wine saps. Hale? I wait until he looks at me. Thank you for this. For teaching me. I know you probably have better things to do than spend your morning explaining apples to a hopeless baker. Something softens in his expression. You're not hopeless. You're a disaster? Enthusiastic, he says diplomatically. Though you are the only person I've ever met who managed to get flour in their ear. I reach up self-consciously to touch my ear, and he laughs, the sound rich and unexpected and beautiful. Not now, he says, stepping closer. Here. His hand comes up, gentle fingers brushing my earlobe. From yesterday's lesson. I hold perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. His touch is feather light, but I feel it all the way to my toes. A door slams somewhere near the barn, and Hale steps back like he's been burned. The walls come up behind his eyes so fast it gives me emotional whiplash. We should get back to town, he says, all business again. He starts filling a crate with apples, his movements quick and efficient. I need to open by 9. I watch him for a moment, this contradiction of a man who can be so gentle with a pie crust but so careful with his heart. Whatever you say, boss. He shoots me a look. Don't call me boss. Whatever you say, apple guru. That's worse. Pie master? Tessa. Yes? I give him my most innocent smile. He shakes his head, but I catch that almost smile again. Get in the truck. The evening sun slants through my kitchen windows, turning everything golden as I spread my aunt's recipe card and my growing collection of notes across the counter. The scent of baked apples still lingers from our morning experiments, mixing with the coffee I probably shouldn't be drinking this late. When headlights sweep across my porch, my heart does a little skip. Right on time. I open the door before Hale can knock, and he gives me a look that says he knows exactly what I was doing. Eager much? I gesture vaguely. Checking the weather. Through the door? Shut up and come look at this. I grab his arm without thinking and pull him toward the kitchen. His flannel shirt is soft under my fingers, and I can feel the warmth of him even through the fabric. I let go quickly, pretending not to notice the way he clears his throat. Look, I say, pointing to my notes. I was thinking about what you said about the different apple varieties, and I had an idea. What if we took Aunt May's basic recipe but changed up the filling? Like, what if we added? If you say more cinnamon, I'm leaving. Actually. I reach for a bag on the counter. I was thinking we could try adding these. He peers into the bag, eyebrows lifting. Cranberries? Fresh ones, from your store. I bounce a little on my toes, excited now. I was thinking about what you said about balance. Sweet and tart, firm and soft. And cranberries are fall harvest too, right? Plus, they'd make the filling this beautiful ruby color. I trail off because he's looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. What? Is it a terrible idea? No, he says slowly. It's actually quite clever. Don't sound so surprised. His mouth twitches. I meant the color theory. The taste might be a disaster. Only one way to find out. I reach for the flower, but he catches my wrist. Not tonight. My heart sinks. Oh. Right. You probably need to get home. I brought something else. He releases my wrist and picks up the bag he carried in. If you're up for a different kind of experiment. I peer into the bag. Pizza dough? It's still pastry, he says, suddenly looking uncertain. Just different. Thought it might help you understand how dough works. But if you'd rather. Are you kidding? This is perfect. I'm already clearing space on the counter. I haven't had homemade pizza since, actually, I've never had homemade pizza. Never? He sounds genuinely horrified. Unless you count the kind that comes in a tube. He closes his eyes like he's in physical pain. We're pretending you didn't say that. The tube makes a fun popping sound when you. No. He shrugs off his jacket, hanging it on one of my kitchen chairs. Just, no. Get me a bowl for the flour. We work side by side, shoulders occasionally brushing as he teaches me how to stretch the dough without tearing it. His hands guide mine through the motions, and I try very hard to focus on the technique and not on how right this feels. Gentle, he murmurs when I get too aggressive. Let the dough tell you what it needs. The dough needs therapy if it's that complicated. He huffs out a laugh, and I feel it warm against my ear. You're impossible. You like it. He doesn't answer, but his hands linger on mine for a moment longer than necessary. When it comes time for toppings, we hit our first real disagreement. Pineapple absolutely goes on pizza, I insist, brandishing a can at him. It's sweet and savory. Like maple bacon. It's an abomination. He's laying out pepperoni with the same precision he uses for lattice crusts. And that's from a can. Oh, I'm sorry, did you happen to bring a fresh pineapple in that magic bag of yours? He shoots me a look, but I catch the amusement in his eyes. The proper toppings are already here. Boring toppings. Classic toppings. Snob. Heathen. We end up making 2 pizzas. His classic and my adventure in culinary crime, as he calls it. The kitchen fills with warmth and the smell of baking bread, and something else too. Something that feels a lot like happiness. When the pizzas are done, we sit at my small kitchen table, the golden evening light painting everything soft. I make a show of moaning in delight at my first bite of pineapple pizza, and he rolls his eyes so hard I think they might stick. Here. I hold out a slice. Try it. No. 1 bite. Absolutely not. Please? I bat my eyelashes outrageously. For science? He stares at me for a long moment, then sighs like a man facing execution. 1 bite. And you never mentioned this to anyone. I mime zipping my lips, watching as he takes the smallest possible bite. His expression goes through several interesting changes. Well? He swallows carefully. It's. Yes? Not entirely awful. I pump my fist in victory. Huh. I knew it. I said not entirely awful. That's not an endorsement. You like it. You like my weird pizza. Admit it. Instead of answering, he reaches over and swipes a smudge of sauce from the corner of my mouth with his thumb. The touch is casual, almost automatic, but it sends electricity zinging through me. We both freeze. You had. He pulls back, cheeks flushing slightly. There was sauce. Right. My voice comes out a bit breathless. Thanks. We eat in silence for a moment, the air between us charged with something new and fragile. Finally, I clear my throat. So, about that cranberry apple pie. His laugh breaks the tension, warm and rich. Tomorrow. 6 a.m. You're a cruel man, Hale Fletcher. So I've been told. But he's smiling, and it transforms his whole face. Makes him look younger, lighter. Makes me want to find new ways to make him smile like that again. As if reading my thoughts, he schools his expression back to its usual reserve. But something has shifted between us, as subtle and important as the difference between a good crust and a great one. I should go, he says, standing. Early morning. I walk him to the door, where he pauses, hand on the knob. Tessa? The cranberry idea. It's good. Really good. Your aunt would be proud of you for thinking outside the box like that. The words hit me right in the heart, making my eyes sting. Thank you, I whisper. He nods once, sharply, and then he's gone, leaving me standing in my doorway with the taste of pizza and possibilities on my tongue. Strictly practical lessons, my eye. We're baking up something much more complicated than pie, and we both know it. And I'm pretty sure neither of us knows quite what to do about that.
Chapter 4. Hale. You're doing it again. I say, watching Tessa hover over the bowl of dry ingredients. She doesn't look up from her intense scrutiny of the flour mixture. Doing what? Overthinking. I move to stand behind her, close enough to catch the vanilla scent that seems to follow her everywhere. It's flour, not a graphic design project. You don't have to stare at it for artistic inspiration. Maybe I'm just admiring how the cinnamon creates a lovely counterpoint to the. If you added extra cinnamon again. She turns to face me, all wide-eyed innocence. Would I do that? Yes. Her laugh fills my mother's kitchen, where we've been meeting for the past week because the lighting is better than at her cabin. At least, that's what I told myself when I suggested it. You're such a grump. She bumps her hip against mine as she reaches for the pastry cutter. Even when you're trying not to be. I'm not trying not to be anything. But even I can hear the lie in my voice. These early morning sessions have become I look forward to more than I should. She starts cutting the butter into the flour, her technique much improved from our first lesson. You know what I think? I'm sure you'll tell me. I think you secretly enjoy our lessons. She glances up at me through her lashes. I think you like teaching me, even when I mess up. Even when I add extra cinnamon. I make a noncommittal sound, moving to check the oven temperature. But she's right, darn her. I do enjoy this. The quiet mornings, the way she hums off-key while she works, even her ridiculous arguments in favor of excessive spice use. Your butter pieces are too big, I say instead of acknowledging any of that. Fix it for me? I look over, ready to remind her that she needs to learn this herself, but something in her expression stops me. She's not being lazy or flirtatious. She's giving me an opening. Like she knows I need the distraction of something to do with my hands. I take the bowl, our fingers brushing in the exchange. Watch, I say, demonstrating the proper technique. The familiar motions are soothing, grounding. See how the butter breaks down evenly? My mom used to say good pie crust is like good music. It's all about rhythm. The words slip out before I can catch them. I freeze, the pastry cutter suspended mid-motion. Tessa is very still beside me. She taught you to bake? I could brush it off. Change the subject. But something about the gentleness in her voice makes me want to answer. Yes. I focus on the bowl, not looking at her. She said I had good hands for it. Patient hands. A memory surfaces of Mom guiding my fingers through the motions of crimping edges, laughing when I made them too deep. She used to do all the baking for the store. People would come from 3 towns over for her pies. Like they do for yours now? I shake my head. I don't bake for the store. Haven't since the hospital calls at midnight. Since the recipes she never wrote down because we always baked them together. Since the first holiday season without her, when the sight of her rolling pin nearly brought me to my knees. A warm hand touches my arm, and I realize I've stopped moving. Hale. It's not the same without her. The words come out rough. I tried, after. It never felt right. The store needed to stay open, so I focused on that. Let the baking go. Except you didn't, she says softly. Not really. You remembered everything she taught you. You're teaching me. Something tightens in my chest. Tessa. When I bake with you, she continues, her hand still on my arm, I feel closer to my aunt. Like I'm getting to know her in a new way, through something she loved. She pauses, then adds quietly, maybe it could be like that for you too. Not replacing the memories, but adding to them? I look down at her then, this woman who sees too much and feels too deeply and somehow makes me want to do the same. She's got flour on her nose and understanding in her eyes, and suddenly it's hard to remember all the reasons I've been keeping my distance. Your aunt, I say, my voice hoarse, used to bring my mother flowers every Sunday. Said a kitchen needed growing things to balance all the baking. I swallow hard. Mom saved petals from every bouquet between cookbook pages. I still find them sometimes, pressed and perfect, like they're waiting to remind me. I trail off as Tessa's hand slides down my arm to cover mine where it grips the pastry cutter. Her fingers are warm, steady. Real. Thank you for telling me that, she whispers. We stand there for a long moment, her hand on mine, the morning sun painting everything gold. It would be so easy to turn my hand over, to lace our fingers together, to let myself feel something other than the careful distance I've maintained for so long. Too easy. I step back, gently disentangling our hands. Your crust is warming up, I say gruffly. Need to get it in the fridge. She lets me retreat, but I feel her eyes on me as I move around the kitchen, straightening things that don't need straightening. The silence should be awkward, but somehow it's not. She gives me space to pull myself together, humming softly as she wraps the dough for chilling. Hale, she says finally. I think your mom would be proud of you. Not just for the baking, but for. She gestures between us. This. For sharing it. The words hit like a physical touch. I have to turn away, bracing my hands on the counter as more memories wash over me. Mom's laugh, her hands guiding mine, her voice saying baking is love made visible, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that. We should check on those apples, I say when I can trust my voice again. But before I move to the stove, I add quietly, thank you. She doesn't ask what for. Just smiles that sunrise smile of hers and says, anything for my favorite grumpy teacher. And that's what terrifies me most of all is the realization that I'd do anything to keep that smile coming. Steam rises from our latest creation, the tantalizing scent making my stomach growl. The pie looks perfect, golden brown with just the right amount of bubbling around the edges. Even the lattice work is even, though Tessa's strips are still a little thicker than they should be. Well, she asks, practically vibrating with anticipation. What's the verdict? I take my time examining the pie, partly because it needs to cool and partly because I enjoy the way she squirms with impatience. The crust looks good. Even color, no soggy bottom. And the filling set properly. Hale Fletcher, if you don't tell me what you really think right now. I hide my smile as I cut into the pie, the knife meeting just the right amount of resistance. The aroma of apples, cranberries and warm spices fills the air, and the slice holds its shape perfectly as I plate it. You did it, I say quietly. This is contest-worthy. Her eyes go wide. Really? You're not just saying that? When have I ever just said anything? She launches herself at me with a squeal, throwing her arms around my neck. I catch her automatically, my hand settling at her waist. She's warm and solid and real against me, smelling of vanilla and cinnamon and something uniquely Tessa. Thank you, she breathes against my neck, and I suppress a shiver. I couldn't have done this without you. I should let go. Should step back. Instead, I find myself holding her closer. You did all the work. She pulls back just enough to look at me, her hands sliding to my shoulders. We both know that's not true. The setting sun paints her skin gold, catches the flour in her hair like stardust. There's a smudge of filling on her cheek, and without thinking, I reach up to brush it away. My thumb lingers on her skin, and her breath catches. Hale, she whispers. We're standing too close. The air between us feels charged, heavy with possibility. Her eyes drop to my mouth, and I find myself leaning in, drawn by something stronger than gravity. The timer on the oven clicks off with a loud ping. Reality crashes back in. I step away so quickly I nearly knock over a chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. The entry meeting is tomorrow, I say, my voice rough. At the community center. 10 a.m. I grab my jacket, needing to get out of this kitchen that suddenly feels too small, too intimate. Don't forget the registration fee. Wait, what? She looks dazed, confused by my abrupt shift. You're leaving? Store inventory. The lie tastes bitter. I should have started an hour ago. But we haven't even tried the pie. It's good. You're ready. I'm already at the door, barely remembering to grab my keys. Lock up when you leave. I don't run. But it's close. The evening air is sharp with approaching winter, but it does nothing to cool the memory of her in my arms, the way she looked at me, the moment when everything I've been fighting almost won. Instead of walking to my truck, I find myself moving into the shadows of the old maple tree. Watching. Waiting. 5 minutes pass before light spills from the kitchen doorway. Tessa steps out, hugging herself against the chill. Even from here, I can see the confusion on her face, the hurt in the set of her shoulders. Real smooth, Fletcher, I mutter to myself. She gathers her things slowly, like she's hoping I'll come back. The pie goes into a carrier with careful movements. She double-checks the lock. When she finally heads toward her car, she pauses, looking around the darkening yard. For a moment, I think she sees me. But she just sighs, her breath visible in the cooling air, and gets into her car. I stay in the shadows until her taillights disappear around the bend. Every instinct screams at me to follow her, to make sure she gets home safely, to explain what? That I'm a coward? That the thought of feeling this much terrifies me? That she makes me want things I swore I'd never want again? The maple leaves rustle overhead, letting the last rays of sunlight flicker across the ground. Somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill calls out, lonely in the gathering dark.
Chapter 5. Tessa. My hands shake slightly as I grab my purse from the passenger seat. It holds my application and the check made out to the Juniper Falls Historical Society. The morning sun feels too bright, too cheerful for the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Will Hale be there today? Yesterday's almost kiss hovers in my memory, making everything more confusing. Deep breath, I tell myself, squaring my shoulders. You can do this. The community center's parking lot is already full. It seems like the whole town has turned out for the pre-contest gathering. Through the windows, I can see people mingling, sharing coffee and conversation. My palm grows sweaty against the leather handle of my purse. There's our newest baker. Hazel's voice rings out as I push through the door. She looks older than the last time I saw my aunt's friend, but there is no mistaking her. She hurries over, charm bracelet jingling. And don't you look lovely today? I smooth my free hand over my dark blue dress. I fell in love with the fabric the moment I laid eyes on it in the thrift store. There are tiny apples printed all over it. Thanks, Hazel. I hope this is okay. You look perfect. She loops her arm through mine, guiding me into the crowd. Come meet everyone properly. The next few minutes are a blur of introductions. Martha from the book club who makes her own jam. Rob who runs the hardware store and his wife Sarah who teaches 3rd grade. Everyone is warm, welcoming, curious about May's niece. I search the crowd for Hale, but don't see him. My heart sinks a little, even though I tell myself it doesn't matter. Well. A familiar pompous voice cuts through the chatter. If it isn't our newest contestant. Henry Caldwell stands by the registration table, his round glasses glinting in the fluorescent light. Something about his smile makes my skin crawl. Good morning, Mr. Caldwell, I say politely, pulling the application from my purse. I'm here to register. Of course you are. He peers at my application through his round glasses. Quite confident, aren't we? Especially for someone who couldn't bake a month ago. The way he says it makes my cheeks heat. I've been practicing. Practicing? His voice carries across the now quiet room. Is that what we're calling it? Because I could have sworn I've seen Hale Fletcher's car at your cabin every morning this week. My stomach drops. From the corner of my eye, I see movement. Hale slips in through the side door, freezing when he takes in the scene. I don't see how that's relevant, I manage. No? Henry's smile widens. Because I'm pretty sure the rules state that all entries must be the contestant's own work. Not the work of a. He pauses dramatically, stand-in chef. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. I feel their eyes on me, judging, assuming. That's not. Hale was just teaching me the basics. Oh, teaching you? Henry's eyebrows shoot up. How convenient. Tell me, did he teach you using his mother's famous techniques? The ones he refuses to share with anyone else in town? The murmurs grow louder. I look desperately toward Hale, willing him to say something, anything. He stands frozen, his face unreadable, his silence deafening. I can assure you, Henry continues, that in all my years participating in this contest, we've never allowed professional assistance. It wouldn't be fair to the other contestants who actually do their own work. I did do my own work. But my voice sounds small, uncertain. The room spins slightly, and I feel tears pricking at my eyes. Hale just showed me how to. Showed you his mother's secrets? Henry interrupts. The ones he's guarded so carefully all these years? Why would he do that, I wonder? More whispers. More stares. And still, Hale says nothing. The tears are threatening to spill now. I look at him one last time, silently begging him to defend me, to explain, to say anything at all. He meets my eyes for a brief moment, then looks away. Something breaks inside my chest. My voice cracks. I need to. I turn and flee, barely aware of Hazel calling my name, of the door banging behind me, of anything except the need to get away. My feet carry me without conscious thought, past my car, down the familiar path, to the cemetery where Aunt May rests beneath an old oak tree. The morning dew soaks through my nice boots, but I barely notice. I'm sorry, I whisper, sinking to my knees beside her headstone. I'm so sorry, Aunt May. I tried to honor your memory, but I just made everything worse. The stone is cool under my fingertips as I trace her name. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here. I'm not you. I can't bake like you, can't make friends like you did, can't. A sob catches in my throat. I can't make him trust me like you did. Somewhere above me, a cardinal sings, bright and clear in the morning quiet. I wipe my eyes with shaking hands. I thought there was hope when he started teaching me, when he shared those stories about his mom. But he couldn't even look at me in there. Couldn't say one word in my defense. The tears come freely now, splashing onto the dewy grass. I feel so stupid. This whole time I've been falling for him, thinking there was something special between us, and he just. Another sob escapes. I don't know what to do, Aunt May. I left everything behind to come here, to be close to your memory, to find a place to belong. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe sometimes home isn't a place you can find. The cardinal calls again, closer now. A breeze stirs the oak leaves overhead, sending dappled shadows dancing across the headstone. I miss you, I whisper. I miss you so much it hurts. And now I've lost him too, before I ever really had him. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. For any of it. I sit there until my tears run dry, until my knees ache from the damp ground, until the morning sun climbs high enough to burn away the dew. But the hollow feeling in my chest remains. The walk back to the community center feels longer, each step heavier than the last. My eyes are still swollen from crying, and my nice dress is damp at the knees from kneeling in the dewy grass. There you are. Hazel's voice cuts through my misery. She's perched on a bench near the center's entrance, as if she's been waiting for me. Knowing Hazel, she probably has. Come along, dear. You look like you could use a cup of coffee. I gesture weakly at the building. Whatever you're planning can wait 15 minutes. She stands, linking her arm through mine with gentle firmness. Novel sips, makes a wonderful lavender latte. I let her guide me down the street, too exhausted to argue. The combination coffee shop and bookstore is warm and quiet, with most of the town's residents still at the community center. Hazel steers me to a corner table and disappears to order our drinks. When she returns, she sets a massive ceramic mug in front of me, topped with a delicate flower design in the foam. Drink up. Sugar helps with shock, and you've had quite a morning. I wrap my hands around the warm mug. I'm withdrawing from the contest. No, you're not. Hazel. Henry Caldwell, she says, pulling out her ever-present tin of mints, is a small man with a smaller mind who thinks winning a pie contest makes him important. She pops a mint in her mouth. Would you like to know what your aunt thought of him? Despite everything, curiosity stirs. What? She said he reminded her of a peacock who'd gotten into the fermented berries, all puffed up and strutting about, making noise without substance. Her eyes twinkle. May had quite a way with words when she wanted to. A laugh bubbles up unexpectedly. She did? Oh my, yes. She used to say the only reason his pies won was because the judges were too afraid of his endless critiques if they chose someone else. Hazel leans forward. But that's not why you're really withdrawing, is it? The laughter fades as quickly as it came. You heard what happened. What he said about Hale helping me. I heard a jealous man trying to diminish something beautiful. She stirs her coffee thoughtfully. Tell me, dear. When you and Hale baked together, did he ever once make the pie for you? No, of course not. He showed me techniques, explained why things worked, but... I trail off, understanding dawning. But every measurement, every motion, every decision was yours. Hazel nods. That's not cheating, Tessa. That's learning. That's growing. But Hale didn't defend me. The words come out small, hurt. He just stood there. Hazel's expression softens. Hale Fletcher has spent the last 5 years hiding his heart behind those store walls. Being angry with him for not knowing how to open up is like being angry at a turtle for having a shell. It might be frustrating, but it's the only way he knows how to survive. I swallow hard. I thought I meant something to him. Oh, sweetheart. She reaches across the table to pat my hand. You mean so much that it terrifies him. Why do you think he shared his mother's techniques with you? He hasn't baked with anyone since she passed. I'm not sure he's baked much at all. I stare into my coffee, watching the foam design slowly dissolve. What am I supposed to do now? What would May do? The question catches me off guard. She'd enter anyway. She'd bake her best pie and hold her head high, no matter what anyone said. Exactly. Hazel's smile is gentle but firm. This isn't about winning, honey. It's about honoring her memory. About showing up, about trying. That's what May did, every single day. But how can I do it without Hale? The question slips out before I can stop it. The same way you've done everything else in your life. One step at a time. She squeezes my hand. And maybe give that turtle a little time to realize his shell isn't as necessary as he thinks. I can't promise that. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you not to give up, on the contest, on Juniper Falls, or on yourself. She releases my hand to dig in her sweater pocket. Now, would you like a mint? May always said they help clear the head. I accept the mint, letting the familiar sweetness dissolve on my tongue. Through the coffee shop window, I can see the mountains rising against the autumn sky, steady and strong. Like they're waiting to see what I'll do next. Okay, I say finally. I'll enter. But I'm doing it my way this time. No help, no Hale, just me and Aunt May's recipes. Hazel beams. That's the spirit. Though I should warn you, May baked at least 15 terrible pies before she got her first good one. 15? I can't help but laugh. She never told me that. Oh, there are lots of stories about your aunt that need telling. Hazel's eyes sparkle. But first, you have a pie to bake. Later that afternoon, I stand in my kitchen surrounded by ingredients. Aunt May's recipe card sits on the counter, worn and loved and full of possibility. Scribbled in the margins are my tweaks. My hands don't shake as I measure the flour. The movements feel familiar now, muscle memory taking over as I cut in the butter. Cold butter, because some lessons are worth keeping even if you're angry at the teacher. As I work, I think about what Hazel said. About showing up, about trying. About shells and survival and the courage it takes to be vulnerable. The pie isn't perfect. The lattice is a little uneven, the crimping slightly rough. But it's mine. Every measurement, every decision, every imperfection is mine. And somehow, that makes it better than perfect. I slide it into the oven just as the sun starts to set, painting my kitchen gold. For the first time since this morning, my chest feels light. Well, Aunt May, I whisper to the quiet kitchen, I think I finally understand what you meant about baking being an act of love. Sometimes the love is for someone else. And sometimes it's for yourself.
Chapter 6. Hale. I'm restocking shelf 3, organizing by size, not product type, because apparently I'm that far gone, when Hazel appears like a particularly determined ghost. Don't even think about pretending you're too busy to talk to me, Hale Fletcher. I set down the can I'm holding. I am busy. Rearranging perfectly good shelves isn't busy, it's avoiding. She plants herself in front of me, silver hair catching the morning light. Just like you've been avoiding everything else these past few days. Hazel. No. She cuts me off with a sharpness I haven't heard since 3rd grade. You're going to listen, because May Arden was my friend, and I won't stand by while you break her niece's heart. The words hit like a physical blow. I didn't. You stood there. Her green eyes flash. You stood there and let Henry Caldwell tear down something beautiful, something that would have made your mother proud. I gripped the edge of the shelf, feeling the wormwood dig into my palm. Don't bring my mother into this. Why not? She's been in this from the beginning, hasn't she? Her recipes, her techniques, her memory. That's what's really keeping you from opening up to that girl. You don't understand? I understand that you're scared. Her voice softens. Scared of feeling something real again, of letting someone see past those walls you built. But Margaret didn't teach you to bake so you could hide behind her memory forever. My mother's name makes me flinch. I'm not hiding. No? Hazel reaches into her sweater pocket, but instead of her usual mints, she pulls out an envelope, yellowed with age. Then why haven't you given Tessa this? I stare at the familiar handwriting on the front. Where did you get that? Found it when I was helping you clean out the back office last spring. You were so quick to pack away your mother's things, you missed this one. She holds out the envelope. It's time, Hale. My hands shake slightly as I take it. I can't. You can. And you will. She turns to leave, then pauses. The contest starts at 2. Don't be late. She's gone before I can respond, leaving me alone with the familiar handwriting and the weight of too many memories. The morning of the contest dawns clear and cold. I've read the letter so many times I have it memorized, but I read it once more anyway, sitting in my truck outside Tessa's cabin. The porch light is on, warm yellow spilling onto the frost-covered steps. Through the kitchen window, I can see her moving around, probably doing last-minute preparations. This is crazy, I mutter, but I get out anyway, the envelope tucked carefully in my pocket. She answers my knock almost immediately, surprise flashing across her face. Hale? All my carefully prepared words desert me. She's wearing that ridiculous pie shirt again, the one with the math joke, and somehow that makes everything harder. I found something. Something you should have. I pull out the envelope before I can lose my nerve. My mother kept it. It's from way back when. Tessa takes the envelope gently, recognition softening her features as she sees the handwriting. This is from my aunt? I nod, shoving my hands in my pockets to keep from reaching for her. She wrote it to my mother when she got sick. Mom saved everything from her friends, but one was special. Tessa opens the envelope carefully, unfolding the paper inside. I know what it says. They are words of encouragement, of friendship, of believing in yourself even when everything seems impossible. Words that somehow feel meant for Tessa as much as they were for my mother. Remember, Tessa reads aloud, her voice catching, that you are never alone in this fight. Your strength amazes me, but on days when you can't find it, I'll be here to remind you how remarkable you are. She looks up at me, eyes shining. She really wrote this? Mom kept it on her nightstand. Said reading May's words made her feel less afraid. I swallow hard. I thought maybe you should have it now. A piece of who she was. Hale, She trails off, clutching the letter. Thank you. We stand there for a moment, the morning air crisp between us, so many things unsaid. I clear my throat. I could give you a ride. To the contest. If you want. A smile tugs at her lips. I'd like that. She disappears inside to gather her things, and I try not to peek as she carefully covers the dish she's bringing. But when she returns, I catch the familiar scent of warm spices and something else, something uniquely Tessa that makes my chest ache. Ready? I ask, holding the door for her. She nods, clutching her precious cargo. The midday sun catches her hair, turning it to copper and gold, and the confident set of her shoulders reminds me so much of May it hurts. Hale? She pauses at the truck. This doesn't fix everything. I know. But it's a start. Something loosens in my chest. Yeah, I say softly. It's a start. As we drive down the mountain, I steal glances at her profile, at the way she holds the covered pie like it's something precious. Like it's something that matters. The smell of warm pastry and spices fills the community center as the judges make their rounds. I hang back, keeping an eye on their expressions as they sample each entry. After 15 years of watching the judging, I know their tells. The way Martha's eyebrows lift when something impresses her. Or how Rob takes a second bite of his favorites. When they reach Tessa's pie, I hold my breath. The design catches my eye first. It's nothing like the traditional lattice work I taught her. She's created something entirely her own, weaving delicate strips of golden crust into an intricate pattern that reminds me of autumn leaves dancing in the wind. At the center, a perfectly crafted apple sits surrounded by detailed leaves, each one unique, each one perfect. It's art and tradition woven together, just like Tessa herself. Martha's eyebrows shoot up at first bite. Rob reaches for a second taste before he's finished his first. Even Henry Caldwell looks reluctantly impressed. When they announce the winners, I'm not surprised to hear Tessa's name called for second place. What does surprise me is the pride that swells in my chest. Not because I taught her a few techniques, but because she took what she learned and made it uniquely, beautifully her own. She accepts her ribbon with grace, thanking the judges, and congratulating Henry on his win. But I see the triumph in her eyes, the joy that has nothing to do with placing and everything to do with proving herself. Later, as the crowd begins to thin, I find her gathering her things. Can I show you something? She looks up, surprised. Now, if you trust me. That sounds like a loaded question. I deserve that. I take a deep breath. But yes, now. Please. The drive to the falls is quiet, but not uncomfortable. The late afternoon sun filters through the autumn leaves, painting everything in gold and amber. When I pull off onto the narrow trail, Tessa looks at me curiously but doesn't ask questions. The waterfall appears through the trees, silver and flowing against dark rocks. Mom used to bring me here when I was small. She told me the sound of falling water could wash away any trouble. It's beautiful, Tessa breathes, stepping closer to the edge of the small clearing. My mother loved this place. The words come easier than I expected. She'd bring her sketchbook, spend hours drawing the way the water moved. Even at the end, when she couldn't make it up here anymore, she'd talk about the sound, how it reminded her that life keeps flowing, keeps moving forward. Tessa turns to face me, her eyes soft with understanding. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm sorry. The words burst out. For staying silent that day, for letting you think even for a moment that you didn't belong here. I was a coward. Hale. No, let me finish. Please. I run a hand through my hair, searching for the right words. When Mom got sick, I thought if I kept everything the same, kept her recipes perfect, kept her memory exactly as it was, somehow I wouldn't lose her. But then you came along with your extra cinnamon and your terrible puns and your way of seeing beauty in everything. I stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. You made me remember that life keeps flowing. That holding on to grief doesn't honor the people we've lost. Living does. Creating does. Loving does. Her breath catches. Loving? Yes. I reach up, cupping her cheek in my palm. Loving. Even if I put pineapple on pizza? A laugh escapes me, rough with emotion. Even then. She smiles and leans into my touch. Tessa? I'm going to kiss you. About time. When our lips meet, it's like everything slots into place, like the perfect ratio of butter to flour, like the exact moment a crust turns golden, like coming home to a kitchen full of warmth and possibility. She tastes like victory and vanilla and something uniquely Tessa, and when she winds her arms around my neck, pulling me closer, I feel the last of my walls crumble. The waterfall sings behind us, a steady rhythm of life moving forward. Somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill calls out. Not lonely this time, but joyful. When we finally break apart, she rests her forehead against mine. So, she murmurs, does this mean you'll teach me to make croissants next? Don't push your luck. But we're both smiling, and when she kisses me again, I taste the future. It's sweet and warm and full of promise. Like the best recipes, some things need time, trust, and a little bit of faith to turn out perfectly imperfect. And as the sun sets behind the mountains, painting the falls in shades of purple and rose, I hold her close and silently thank two remarkable women for teaching me that love, like the best pie crust, is worth the risk of getting your hands messy. Even if it means occasionally tolerating pineapple on pizza.
Epilogue. Tessa. Juniper Falls, 6 months later. Spring sunlight dances through the cherry blossoms lining Main Street as Hale and I walk hand in hand toward the center of town. The morning air carries the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Several storefronts are getting makeovers for the upcoming Spring Blossom Festival. Your poster designs are everywhere, Hale says, nodding toward the lampposts where my artwork blooms in shades of pink and gold. I squeeze his hand. Not bad for the new girl in town, right? You haven't been the new girl for months. He pulls me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. Though you still put too much cinnamon in everything, says the man who sold out of my apple cinnamon muffins before noon yesterday. I shoot back. Unless you hate them all. He tries to hide his smile, but I catch it anyway. It still amazes me sometimes, how freely those smiles come now. Like winter thawing into spring. We pause outside Petals and Posies, where an explosion of color draws my eye. The window display of the flower shop is a masterpiece of tulips and daffodils, arranged with an artist's eye for composition. Beautiful, isn't it? A warm voice says behind us. I turn to find a woman in her late 40s, her dark hair streaked with a few threads of silver pulled back in a loose braid. She wears a canvas apron covered in flower petals, and there's a grace about her that speaks of years of handling delicate blooms. Lila, Hale greets her with obvious affection. The display looks great. Thanks. She turns to me with a kind smile that reminds me of my aunt. You must be Tessa. I've heard so much about you. All lies, I joke. Especially the parts about the smoke detector incidents. Her laugh is warm and knowing. Oh, honey, we all have those stories. I once flooded half the shop when I first started out. Forgot to turn off the flower cooler's water supply before a long weekend. Speaking of long-lost disasters, Hale says, have you seen Graham around yet? Heard he's back in town. Something flickers across Lila's face. It seems like the shadow of something deeper than mere memory. No, not yet. She busies herself adjusting an already perfect bunch of tulips. Though I suppose I will. Small town and all. I catch the careful neutrality in her tone, the way her fingers tremble slightly against the flowers. There's decades of history there, written in the things she's not saying. His dad's recovery is going well, Hale continues, either missing or choosing to ignore the tension. Mom always said old Joe Hart was too stubborn to let a heart attack slow him down. That's good to hear. Lila's smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. If you'll excuse me, I have a wedding consultation waiting. The mother of the bride is particular about her peonies. We say our goodbyes and continue down the street. When we're out of earshot, I ask, so what's the story there? Graham? Hale considers for a moment. They were high school sweethearts. He left town right after graduation, full baseball scholarship to some fancy university out west. Everyone thought they'd end up together, but sometimes timing is everything. He looks down at me, his blue eyes soft. Sometimes you have to wait for the right season. I think about last autumn, about pie crust and promises, and learning to trust. About how love grows in its own time, like flowers pushing through frost. That sounds like a story worth hearing, I muse, watching a cherry blossom drift past on the breeze. 30 years is a long time to carry a what if. Hale just smiles, pulling me close as we walk toward the store, where his mother's recipes and my artistic touch have created something new and wonderful. And somewhere behind us, in a shop full of flowers, another story is waiting to bloom. One that's been growing roots for 3 decades, just waiting for the right moment to blossom. The end. This has been Apple Pie Promises, written by Susanne Ash. Copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Production copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want me to put more of my books on YouTube. Visit my website at www.susanneash.com for more of my books or find me on Amazon.